Guys, bass fishing in the fall can be extremely rewarding, but also extremely challenging. It's all about finding the fish and the areas that they're grouping up in. And I know this sounds obvious, but the reality is there's some things happening in the fall that if you understand, you can make sure that you're in the high productive areas. Now what's going on is temperatures are cooling down, that's cooling down the lakes, vegetation is dying off, and these bass are going on the move. And at the same time, you're getting bait fish that's grouping up in certain keys, and you've got these huge schools of bait fish in certain areas of the lake, and the bass are eventually going to end up in those areas as well to feed up heavily on all that plentiful food, right? Now, that leaves some spots that have a lot of activity and that are you're going to be able to catch a lot of fish, but that also leaves a lot of unproductive water. And if you're fishing those areas where there aren't the bait fish and the bass, you're not going to be catching fish. It's as simple as that. So I've got 3 key things for you to be able to do to find those high percentage areas, and they don't require having electronics or any kind of technology. It's things that you can do from the shore, you can do from a kayak or a boat, and you can find these areas that are going to have more fish, that's going to get you more success. What's up, guys? I'm Travis Moran with Bass Tackle X, and this is extremely easy fall fishing. Number 1, find the birds. Guys, we never know truly what's going on below the surface, but we can look around the environment above to give us clues and indicators what's happening below. And a great way of doing that is looking at the birds that feed on bait fish. If you're seeing egrets line a shoreline, or you're seeing grebes in a cove that are diving down and coming up with bait fish, that's gonna be a huge indicator that there is bait in the area, and there is most likely bass as well. Another thing is birds that don't feed on bait fish but are opportunistic feeders, like seagulls. If you're seeing seagulls diving down and picking stuff up off the water, they're most likely picking up wounded bait fish. What happens is, as birds are diving underneath the water, or bass are feeding, going through these schools, they're wounding bait fish. Those bait fish will come up to the surface, like just swirling. They're basically dying, and they'll come up on the surface, and those seagulls will come down and swoop up and grab them. And so you can see that happening from a long distance away, and that's a huge indicator that there's also bait fish and also active bass in that area. Once you get into those areas, you can look for high probability areas, whether that's island humps or secondary points, and fish those, and you're gonna most likely find some active bass. Number 2, green vegetation. Now, I already mentioned during the fall, you're having a lot of vegetation die off with these cold nights, but there are gonna be areas that are very healthy and still have green, fresh vegetation. These areas are gonna be high probability areas because they're putting off great oxygen, and they're offering places for these bait fish to hang out and hide, and so these bass are gonna be using it as well. So look for the areas where the vegetation ends and you've got just open water. These transition spots are gonna be key that the bait fish are gonna be using, and the bass are gonna be moving along to ambush. Number 3, busting bass. Now, the last one sounds very obvious, but it's something that you should be very aware of, especially in the fall, is active feeding bass on the surface. As these bass are chasing around these schools of bait fish, eventually they're gonna get them pinned up against the surface, and you're gonna just see these explosions, these busting of bass. It's gonna look like a frenzy. If you're close enough, throw a little topwater walking bait or a popper, and you're gonna hook up really quickly. But the other thing is, if you're in an area and you're seeing this happen, it's too far away for you to get to, especially if you're from the shore, just know that you are in the area you need to be in. That's not the only concentration of bass in that area. There should be a ton of bait there, and so as you move around as well, you're gonna connect with some of those schools. Now, bass during the fall will feed up against the surface throughout the day in different conditions, but first thing in the morning and late evening are the 2 most frequent times they're gonna do that. So during these times, if you're not seeing busting fish in the area you're fishing in the wrong spot most likely. So start moving around, cover a lot of water, because you can very well pull into a cove and it's just, you're seeing boils all over the place, active bass. Even if you can't actually catch those fish, that's an area that you wanna concentrate in throughout the the rest of the day, slow down in and try to connect with those fish. If you're fishing from the shore, a lot of times you can just get out and look, pull into a, pull up to a point, look at either areas. If you have binoculars, look across the lake. You can see birds, you'll be able to see activity. That's where you want to be able to spend your time. So in those early mornings and evenings, if you don't feel like you're in the right area, you should spend a lot of time just scouting and trying to find new areas to expand your water and find out areas that you're going to spend more time in the next day or the next weekend or whatever. Understanding these keys to finding high probability areas this time of the year will keep you around large concentrations of bass. Once you identify these areas though, make sure you're mixing up the baits to cover the top, mid, and bottom depths, and then key in on certain areas like secondary points, island humps, or structure like, or cover like docks that are going to be high percentage areas within those high probability areas that you found will keep you connecting with those bass. Guys, I'm Travis Moran with Bass Tackle X. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And remember, no one works harder to help you fish better.